Evening all. Firmly in the grasp of winter now. We've managed to get the chassis rails done, as we've seen. That's been a big heavy job. We've managed to get them front hubs done and all the brake drums done. Another big heavy job. It's given us a bit more space in the workshop, so we've been able to knock together a bit of a trolley to make the axle a bit more mobile. And that's going to be a big, mauling, miserable, heavy job. So there's no better time to procrastinate and do something a little bit different for a change. So while we're doing our aforementioned procrastination, we need to find something else to have a look at. This is the offside front brake off the S80. The reason why I thought it'd be quite interesting to have a look at it is that this is a Foden owned design brake. These are Foden brake shoes. They're not a bought-in brake shoe from Dunlop or Rockwell or whomever. These are actually cast at the foundry, at the Foden foundry. They've got the part number on them there, the FD part number. They've got a reasonably unique way, I've not seen it on any other vehicle, of how the brake shoes are returned or pulled back, or however you want to call it. So we have given it a squirt of diesel. Brakes do sort of operate as a fashion, as you can see. Just chuck the slack adjuster on. So we'll get in a bit closer and have a closer look. So the first thing that a lot of you will notice is there's no return spring here. Even though we've got movement on the camshaft and the brakes are moving and returning, there's no return spring. Now the reason the return spring can't be seen is it's actually in here, and it applies a downward pressure onto the brake shoe so that when it's operated and it rises, you can see the movement there, it pushes it back down. So what we'll do, we'll get the socket on it, get it undone. I fully expect it to pull that stud out because I couldn't get the split pin out that's there, and we'll have a closer look. Right, before I remove the brake shoes, I think it's going to be easier just to whip these back plates off, because they've obviously got to come off to be cleaned up for paint. Thread wise, that looks like a 1/4 UNC. Quite short with that living in it there. But again, they're in really good shape. I know we've covered that before in previous videos. Given the age of these in the uncharted territory, I thought the safest option was a ratchet. Okay, so we're going to undo the bolt now for the spring. You do just need to raise the brake shoe slightly to get the socket in. So we've got it going easier now. Worked it with some diesel, and we've swapped it to a bit thinner wall socket. It's a 3/4 drive because I haven't got 1 3/16 in 1/2 inch drive. It's got a 3/4 adapter on it, 1/2 inch to 3/4. That's coming off nice now. I'm going to use the long ratchet underneath with this socket. It seemed to be a bit easier than with that big impact socket. So, as you can see, we've got the cone-shaped return spring in pretty good order. This is the nut that cone spring sits in, like so. Obviously goes onto this bolt. Oh. Yeah, she ain't coming anywhere very quickly. Sits onto that bolt. The bottom part of the spring here sits into the shoe, and that's what provides a spring action Right, the bottom one, as you can see, has pulled the stud. Both brake shoes are pretty much seized. Oh, that one's not too bad. So I've got this pinch bolt arrangement here. We're going to have to slacken that up so we can push this pin out. The problem we have here, these brake shoes are so much more precious than that pin, so we just need to be careful with everything. That didn't feel great, did it? It's coming out okay. Nice and free, in fact, that look. So you can see it's got the end on it. I think it's probably been compromised a bit when the bolt's gone in for locating into this pin in here. Okay, so we've got the shoes lifted up off the cam now, so we'll have a look at getting the cam out, but before we do, let's have a look how much play there is in it. There is a little bit in that back end. I don't know if you can see that. The nut on the end retains a big washer that in turn retains the slack adjuster. Of course, on later vehicles, a lot of you will be more familiar with a circlip. Yeah, nice even gentle taps seem to be doing it. So we've got the spacer, some dirt and the cover. Yeah, there looks to be our circlip. Can't hurt, can it? Again, you're probably looking at first time removal here, aren't you? You know, given the low mileage of the vehicle. Okay. Wow, you're seeing it as quick as I am. Not bad at all. There's obviously some water penetration due to all them years of just being sat there, but you'd have to say that from a wear perspective that does look pretty good. That's the result. This one of course is a Z-cam because of the way it operates rather than the S-cam. Right, we'll get this off the bracket into the press. See if we can just push that pin out nice and gently. So we'll just give it a gentle push just to see if, well, yeah, we're getting movement already, look, so that's pretty good. Just keep on going nice and steady at that, and all we need to do is obviously push through in, you know, once the bracket's released. We are there. You can see we've got a ridge all the way around that pin as well for locating that bolt we saw earlier. So we've got this bar in, we're just going to knock that pin out. Beautiful. So that's his bracket. That's going to go in the bath now and we'll give it a good rinsing off. We've still got... Right, good opportunity to have a look at these brake shoes now. We've got the seat where the spring goes, so you can see those shiny areas there and there where the spring's been sat. Spring sits in there on the shoe, obviously. It gives that spring pressure. You tighten that nut down onto the stud on the backing, and that's where you get your return spring brake pressure from. The shoes themselves are in incredibly good order. Bags of lining left. almost certainly an asbestos line in that, so we obviously need to be careful that. I started work in the mid-80s and we were still using asbestos linings. The bushings in here are non-existent, so I've got to assume that they didn't have a bushing, because you know I didn't work on these that much back in the day and I can't remember, but the pin's tight and I just don't think they had a bushing. Rollers seized up, no great surprise there, but again them freed off, and overall that's pretty good. And this one's the same, you know, the rollers seized up, bushings are good, linings are in great order, so we'll get them cleaned up. So as you can see with this brake shoe, I've already removed the roller and the locking attachments. Everything's freed up, it's had to go on the wire wheel, so that's all nice and free. There's a very, very faint flat spot on there. I don't think you'll be able to see it, you can barely feel it. And that's due to the roller not rolling and sliding. So you see a lot of people who will grease this outer edge of the roller, and that's wrong, because it's a roller. It's designed to roll, not skid. The washers need to have a bit of a surface on the end, greasy surface on the end. The bit that sits into the shoe here, that needs to be dry. So we've got a nice roller action here, and that's not rolling in the shoe. What I don't want it to do is wear the shoe. These are a reasonably simple clip that Foden use. Wouldn't be too difficult to reproduce if we needed to. I am going to put a little bit of grease on them. Don't like to build things up dry. Do better if we'd got washers right way around. Perfect. Right, I'm going to put that to one side, get the other one cleaned up, and then we'll be ready to reassemble. Doesn't really need a lot more of the shoe. We've looked at the brake shoes, so now it's time to have a look at this bracket. This is what the brake shoes sit on, you'll remember. I've removed the stud that was left in that retained that bottom brake shoe. As you can see, fine thread, it's UNF, 3/4 nut, 19mm, and you can see there's a hole in it for a split pin that we're going to have to sort out. So it's been through the parts bath. We're giving it a good wash. You can see it was painted. I am going to paint them because ultimately it just makes life so much easier when you're servicing. This is the brake camshaft, Z-cam you'll remember, in really fine order, no wear on it, little bit of moisture been into it there with it being sat, but the splines are in good shape, everything's cleaned up really well, all good. If we put it in the bracket, and now we've got it on a solid bracket instead of that wobbly one we had it on earlier, you'll see that there's just nothing in it. There's a very, very faint little bit, but nothing that won't grease out, and certainly nothing that could be improved by fitting new bushers. What can be improved, of course, is the oil seals. They are in either end, and they're going to be, wouldn't surprise me if they're original, because a lot of stuff seems original and it's not done a lot of work. I think I should be able to get hold of oil seals easy enough. So I'm going to pull these and get some more ordered. It's just a standard seal. So we can see there we've got this lip where the bush is in the housing. You can see that's pretty even all the way around, which would indicate that it's in pretty good shape. So as you can see with this seal, it's in the same direction in the housing as the seal on the other side. And that means that when you pump grease in through that grease nipple there, the grease in theory should come this way. This seal is designed like this, or designed to be put in this way, so that grease is not forced into the brake shoe area. Quite often see, or have, you know, in the past, long time ago now I suppose, I've been off the tools 20 years, but I have seen in the past where people have fitted the seals together like that, and then we've ended up with grease in the brake shoes. Take a little bit of chewing, that. Bushes come. Right, so I saved you the painting process because I've showed you that. Nearly lost that then, didn't we? So the back plates have come up quite well. Obviously we've done both sides because that's what we do. You'll remember we pulled the seals, managed to get some seals, not a lot of money, so I picked up 8 that will do the entire truck. Got them from AD Bearings there up at Swallows. So we've got the back seal in. This is the slack adjuster end. This is the one that we want the grease to come this way if it's under pressure. So I've had lots of fancy bearing insertion tools over the years for various bits of things, and I've obviously spun them up and all sorts of things. You still can't beat the right size socket in my opinion if you're just nice and careful. You go in, an absolute treat. Take your time. Don't overstroke them. Get them flush. And that is lovely. So the first job on here is to chase out the threads so we can fit those studs. We're also going to do the ones that support the back plate. I'm not going to use a tap, I am going to use a thread chaser. We don't want to be cutting a new thread. That'll make all the difference when we come to fit the studs for the springs. Not sure whether you can see how much it's brought off, but it doesn't bring a massive amount off, and it just cleans the dirt. This one's the quarter UNC chaser. It's a snap-on tool and just makes a really nice job without taking a load more material out. The banging outside isn't because we've moved to Beirut, it's because it's Guy Fawkes night, just in case you were wondering. Right, next job is to get the camshaft in. You never want to put one of these in dry either, so just a good liberal greasing. We're using a graphite grease here again because it gives a really good coating, high temperature resistance, and it sticks really well. You know, it's not going to push off like something like Agricastle or something daft like that. Lovely. Got a nice satisfying blob of grease here as well. It'll take off. Right, I've got my circlip. Obviously I've not painted that for obvious reasons. We've had the pin in the lathe and given it some memory tape and just taken off the eye spots. There was a nasty little burr on that edge, probably from a hammer strike, so we've taken him out. We're not interested in smacking this with hammer. And you can also see here that inside here she's had a really good cleaning up with some memory paper, so all that's nice and smooth. So, right, okay, so we've cleaned up the rubbing surfaces now. Here, as you can see, a little bit of oil on there. Pin's oiled up. We're going to apply the grease after the event by pushing the pin to and fro, as we'll show. So let's get the brake shoes on. Get it lighter, didn't We've just got that started. So all I'm doing here is making sure that we've got plenty of grease through this shoe spindle, hinge, call it what you will. You can see it takes no effort to knock it through, but I just want to make sure we've got a good coating in there. I'm going to give the nut some grease, protect it for when we do the maintenance and what have you. Okay, so we've got this pin nice and free. We can quite easily push it in and out. So it's not only important for the swivel on the shoe, but also important for locking your pin locking device in. So we've got that central. We know it's free, we've just been messing with it. Now we can't move it, it's bottoming out. So we know that pin's in the right place. I'm going to put some blue lock and seal on that. So we've got the lock and seal on it there. You know, if that comes out, however unlikely, you could be having a really bad day there, couldn't you? Okay. Right, let's get the bottom spring in. Seen this, Richard? Blind and left-handed. Great stuff. Lovely. Right, we've given these a couple of coats of undercoat and a couple of coats of colour. There's only Kevin going to see this, isn't there? So we'll just get it painted on and then it's right, isn't it? Right, so we've got the brake working lovely now. As you can see, she's rolling grand and she's returning. We'll do a final rub upon the lining when we fit. You'll notice we've got this gap here. That's controlled by these washers in that gap, which keeps the shoe central on the cam. Of course, we've got the circlip behind there, which also manages some of the end float. And of course, we'll have the slack adjuster bolted on over this side. I've got that cable tie on just for storage. I don't want to lose these two. Cable tie will stop that being lost. That's typical. Just trying to do a bit of filming. We've got Chris Walworth by them here. Evening, just been nattering to the owner of this beastie. The good thing about Fodens is they always produce some really good manuals. I was hoping they might have a setting for these springs up here or some guidance on how you set them up. But this is an absolute gem from them. The removal and the replacement of the Foden brake shoes is a simple and rapid operation requiring very little skill. I can imagine our Swedish brethren putting that in their manual, couldn't you? And there's another good one over here somewhere. Should the customer prefer to reline the brake shoes himself? Could you imagine writing that in this day and age of the nanny state? Got some lovely illustrations in these books, and yeah, well worth a bedtime read. So this brake build's been a nice little job just to break up some of the bigger jobs. We're definitely on the axle next time. We're going to start pulling the hubs. That'd be the obvious place to start. So we'll strip the hubs off, then we'll do the diff. In the meantime, I'll get this wrapped up into a blanket and get it in the shed out of the way. That'll be just nice and easy pop on now when we've got the stub and the axle on. That'll just be a case of just chuck them on, and yeah, nice way to spend a few nights out.